Come fly with me, let's fly away. If you can use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. Come fly with me, let's fly away. Come fly with me, let's float down to Peru. In Lama Land there's a one-man band, and he'll toot his flute for you. Come fly with me, let's take off in the blue. Once I get you up there where the air is rarefied, we'll just glide starry-eyed. Once I get you up there, I'll be holding you so near. You may hear the angels cheer because we're together. Weather-wise, it's such a lovely day. Just say the words and we'll beat those birds down to Acapulco Bay. It's perfect for a flying honeymoon, they say. So come fly with me, let's fly away. Oh, come on and fly. Once I get you up there where the air is rarefied, we'll just glide starry-eyed. Once I get you up there, I'll be holding you so near. You may hear all the angels cheer because we're together. Weather-wise, it's such a lovely day. You just say those words and we'll beat those birds down to Acapulco Bay. It's so perfect for a flying honeymoon, they say. Come fly with me, let's fly, let's fly. Pack up, let's fly away.
All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye, but the dawn is breaking, it's early morn. The taxi's waiting, he's blown his horn. Already I'm so lonesome I could die. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go. There's so many times I let you down, so many times I played around. And I tell you now, they don't mean a thing. Every place I go, I'll think of you. Every song I sing, I'll sing for you. When I come back, I'll bring your wedding ring. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go. Now the time's come to leave you. One more time, let me kiss you. Close your eyes, I'll be on my way. Dream about the days to come when I won't have to leave alone. About the times I won't have to say. Oh, kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go. I hate to go.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo. That's where you wanna go to get away from it all. Bodies in the sand, tropical drink melting in your hand. We'll be falling in love to the rhythm of a steel drum band. Down in Kokomo, Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama. Come on, pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? And then we'll take it slow. That's where we wanna go. We gotta go. Martinique, that Montserrat mystique. We'll put out to sea, and we'll perfect our chemistry. By and by we'll defy a little bit of gravity. Afternoon delight, cocktails and moonlit nights. That dreamy look in your eye, give me a tropical contact high. Way down in Kokomo, Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm saying all this because we have attendees coming from all over the world, including our guest speaker today, who is joining us from Australia. So my name is Frédéric Dimanche. I'm the director of the Ted Rogers School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. And it's my pleasure to continue this habit of celebrating World Tourism Day at the school at Ryerson University. As some of you may know, World Tourism Day is something that has been in existence for 18 years now. It's an initiative of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and it celebrates every year tourism around a theme. And this year's theme was rural tourism. Tourism and rural development celebrates the sector's ability to drive economic development and provide opportunities outside of big cities, including in those communities that would otherwise be left behind. So World Tourism Day is also an event that highlights the important role that tourism plays in preserving and promoting culture and heritage all around the world. So our guest speaker, you're going to learn about him a little bit later, works for a company that does all that has been instrumental in promoting travel and tourism around the world, adventure travel more specifically. And you will hear this in a few minutes. If I may quote Zurab Pololikashvili, the UNWTO's Secretary General, tourism helps rural communities hold on to their unique natural and cultural heritage, supporting conservation projects, including those safeguarding endangered species, lost traditions, or flavors. So you can see that tourism has a very strong responsibility to work as a sustainable tool for development in urban environments as much as in rural communities. So again, I would like to welcome all of you. I know we have students, we have colleagues, we have a tourism professional who are joining us from all over. And at this point, I would like to pass the microphone, if I may say, in this virtual event to Sonya Graci, who is my colleague and who is the director of the Hospitality and Tourism Research Institute at Ryerson University. Sonya?
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you so much, Frederick. Hi, everyone. Well, I'm very, very excited that we get to have this event, albeit virtually. But before we begin, I would like to have our land acknowledgement. As many of you may know, we at Ryerson, we start off every meeting with our land acknowledgement, acknowledging our traditional territory and the traditional peoples and land upon which we sit. So Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And not only did we have World Tourism Day this week, but yesterday was Orange Shirt Day, in which we acknowledged all the children that went through the residential school system in Canada. So I think it's extremely important that we always start with our land acknowledgement and we remember a lot that has happened in our history. So thank you again for coming. As I said, I'm really excited. I mean, yes, it's always great to have an in-person event. You know, we've always been really successful with doing so, but because the one good thing about doing this virtually is that we get to have Leigh Barnes from Intrepid Travel, you know, the Chief Customer Officer, come and speak to us today. And I am absolutely thrilled. I heard Leigh speak in January at the Impact Conference in Victoria, the Sustainable Travel and Tourism Conference in Canada. And I was really excited because I love everything that Intrepid is doing. And as many of you may or may not know, one of our alumni and one of a really, really great, you know, alumni that we have that spends a lot of time with us, Mikey Sadowski, has worked for Intrepid for the last 8 years. And we have worked at Ted Rogers School of Hospitality and Tourism Management with Intrepid for over 10 years. You know, I took one of our Rachel and I planned a student trip to Peru about 8 years ago, which Mikey was on. And so we have a lot of synergies with Intrepid. And as someone who's worked in the in the sustainable tourism industry, you know, Intrepid has always come to the forefront as being one of the top sustainability companies. So of course, I'm thrilled to have Leigh here. I just wanted to talk a bit about our institute and what the Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research does. And this is just one of the events that are coming virtually to you this year. Next week this is basically launching our Compass series, which is our speaker series. And we have a whole host of really great speakers coming to have events like this where they get to share about a lot of their work in tourism. And I think it is the most important time to talk about innovation. And I'm gonna talk to Leigh about all the innovative things that they're doing. And this stuff is gonna blow you away, because I feel that this is the time that we need innovation the most. This is the time that we need to rebuild our tourism industry with sustainability as a focus. And we need to learn from each other and from best practices. So our research institute, our Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research, basically does this. We work with industry and we develop and conduct applied research with industry. So, you know, this is something that we've had a history of doing. And please visit our webpage, because we have a lot of studies on the go. We research in sustainability and Indigenous tourism, in consumer behavior and destination management and marketing. And our faculty has a very broad research interests. And we do believe that we do conduct cutting edge research that is very applicable to the tourism industry. So this really does fall in line with a lot of what we do. And what we want to promote. And as researchers, you know, we need to be innovative, and we go out and look for a lot of these best practices. So please go on to htmresearch.ca and you can see some of the things that we've been doing. One other initiative I'd like to mention, other than our speaker series, is our Behind the Study, which is a podcast with our researchers, not only from Ted Rogers School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, but also from ones that we've worked with in collaboration. And you can hear a lot about, you know, how researchers kind of come up with a lot of these studies. So it is my absolute pleasure. You could tell how absolutely thrilled and excited I am right now. But it is my pleasure to introduce Leigh Barnes. So following a tenure as Regional Director of North America for Intrepid, in 2018, Leigh Barnes was appointed to the role of Chief Purpose Officer to jumpstart the company's continued focus on sustained growth of Intrepid's purpose-led initiatives, during which time he worked closely with the Intrepid Foundation and external partners to create more shared value projects and operate a business with a purpose beyond profit. In late 2019, Barnes moved into the role of Chief Customer Officer, responsible for customer experience, digital brand, as well as advocacy on issues that are important to Intrepid's customers, communities, and workers. So we're going to talk to Leigh a bit about today about some of their stuff in relation to carbon management, how they're dealing with the COVID crisis, what they have on the horizon. And Leigh, you know, normally what I would do if you were speaking in my class is I would ask you to start with, and I don't know if this is going to throw you off, but I would ask you to also give us a bit more insight into Leigh. Like, how did you get here? You know, how did this fall into your lap? Because I think a lot of times, you know, we have a lot of students on here or people who are just starting in the tourism industry, and it's so interesting to hear how people get to where they are. So if you wouldn't mind adding that in too.
No, I can start off by that and then get into the talk if you want to do that. I suppose besides asking my parents, I'm probably the next best person to tell you how I got here. But yeah, it's more, I suppose, a combination of good luck and good management. I think I've had quite a varied career, and I've chopped and changed and done a number of different things. I studied arts, history and commerce at university, and then have taken on a myriad of different roles. So I think one piece of advice I'd give to anyone and how I got here was really just being open to opportunity. I swapped and changed my career a number of times and really just took whatever opportunities came my way. So I probably didn't expect Sonya to be working specifically on purpose, but I think, you know, one piece of advice I give to my staff is always be open to opportunities, and to put yourself in the best position to be lucky. And I think being open to different opportunities is a great way to do that. So hopefully that answers your question, but I think my mum and my dad might have a better answer as well around how I got here and what they think has been some of the secrets to my success or what's happened along the way. All right, I'll get stuck into the presentation now. Sonya, I hope I can live up to the great introduction you've given me. And obviously doing this virtually, I really wish I was in Toronto. I spent a lot of time, almost 5 years living in Toronto. So it's great that I'm able to join you virtually, and I hope I can live up to Sonya's amazing introduction. Bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen now and get the presentation up. I also just want to warn everyone that you may get a special guest. My little Yorkie, Archie, may bark or attack or be involved at some point, depending on how the presentation goes. So you may be in store for a guest visitor of a small Yorkie at some point. So bear with me now while I share my screen, and I'll start the presentation. All right, time to get into serious mode. So, yeah, first off, thanks heaps for having me. I really appreciate Ryerson and specifically Dr. Sonya Graci for inviting me to be here today and be involved in your World Tourism Day celebrations. Now, as you guys can gather, and from the intro, I am Australian and have a particularly thick Australian accent, but I'm currently based in Melbourne, where Intrepid Travel is headquartered. Now, as I'm based in Melbourne, I wanted to kick off. I know Sonya did the land acknowledgement for Toronto, but it's really important to me as an Australian that we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. And of the land on which I live, the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Burong peoples of the Kulin Nation, recognising their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Nations people with us today. Aboriginal people have a deep and continuous connection to the place now called Victoria, which is where I currently sit giving this presentation and I call home. Aboriginal people have lived here in the Maribyrnong River Valley for at least 40,000 years, if not longer. Amazing, 40,000 years, incredible. The area where I live is now known as the City of Maribyrnong, and it was a significant meeting place for the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Burong peoples. Where two of our main rivers meet, the Maribyrnong and Yarra rivers, they join at an especially important place, as it symbolised the joining of groups who would travel along the river. Now, European settlement in Maribyrnong in the 1830s had a massive impact on First Nations people, unfortunately decimating communities, displacing families and disrupting lives. And yet, in spite of this, First Nations culture remains a dynamic force in contemporary society, contributing to diverse and thriving inner west in Melbourne, Australia, where I live. This acknowledgement of country is important as it recognises the First Nations people have occupied and cared for this continent, Australia, for over 65,000 years. So thanks for that. Now, as Tony said, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Intrepid Travel. I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to be responsible for our customer experience, digital, brand, and also what's probably the closest and passionate part of my role is advocacy on issues that are important to Intrepid's customers, communities, and workers. Now, it wasn't too long ago that I spent some of my best years living in Toronto as the Regional Director of North America for Intrepid. I'm particularly shattered that both the Raptors and Blue Jays are out of the playoffs, and I've been watching closely from home. I've also had the pleasure of working closely with Ryerson's tourism school during that time, and I'm honoured to be back speaking here today with the university community. Now, on to the real topic of conversation. It's an understatement to say that this year has been unprecedented. We've heard that word thrown around so often, and particularly for the tourism industry. But on the flip side, it has also provided us with a massive opportunity to learn from the curveballs thrown our way and rethink what the future of travel looks like. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Intrepid yet, we are a global tour operator that has been taking people to travel the local way on real life experiences that give back to the places and people it visits for over 30 years. Now, pre-pandemic, Intrepid operated over 1,000 different itineraries, and we traveled to over 120 countries all over the world, from Antarctica to Vietnam to Morocco and everywhere in between. And our goal is to not be the best travel company in the world, but very clearly and passionately to be the best travel company for the world. And I'm incredibly proud to work for a company that has that as its impact statement. Now this year, COVID-19 has brought the world and the travel industry to a halt. Due to its impacts, we at Intrepid Travel had to suspend our operations for the first time in our 31-year history on March 14. After getting the 3,000 travellers we had on the ground home safely and handling over 50,000 bookings we had scheduled over the course of the year, we made the decision to use this unprecedented time as a force for good for both our business and the industry. That's why we shifted our focus to rebuilding the tourism industry more responsibly and advocating for a more sustainable and ethical future post-pandemic. Now, as the world's largest adventure travel company, a certified B Corp, and a pioneer in sustainable travel for over 30 years, we chose to use this time of travel cessation to think about how we can better rebuild the company itself, while using the tools and insights we have built over the years to encourage others in the industry to use this shutdown time as a time to challenge themselves and to emerge from this crisis more responsible. I understand that all things COVID-19 are at the top of our minds now, but we mustn't lose sight of the broader sustainability issues, particularly climate change. While the pandemic poses a huge threat to the viability of the travel industry, climate change poses an even bigger threat long term. We're already seeing these impacts of extreme weather happening more often and becoming more intense, such as the bushfires that raged across Australia at the beginning of the year. But there will be no vaccine for climate change when the time comes, like there may very well be soon for COVID. Before COVID-19 brought the world and the travel industry to a standstill, tourism accounted for roughly 8% of the world's carbon emissions. And while the pandemic has disrupted our industry, it has also provided us with the opportunity to reassess our actions and commit to being better. To use this time to challenge ourselves to emerge from this crisis better than we were before, more sustainable and more ethical. Now, despite ongoing challenges in the tourism industry, Intrepid launched a series of initiatives this year to support a responsible rebuild of the travel industry, focusing on key areas such as advocating for net zero emissions by 2030 and ending exploitative animal tourism. The goal of these initiatives is to provide an easy way for other travel companies to adopt more sustainable and ethical practices. A key example of this is in July, we released a new resource called a 10-step quick start guide to decarbonise your travel business. It was written by our own in-house environmental impact specialist, Dr. Susanna Etty, and the complimentary quick start guide available for download from our website provides a low barrier way for other travel companies to get started on their carbon journey by offering straightforward and clear steps, from understanding how climate change is impacting your business to developing a carbon management strategy, and using real-world examples from Intrepid to show how others can implement similar strategies within their own organisation. In late July, Intrepid teamed up with several key organisations in travel and advocacy, including the Adventure Travel Trade Association, Amnesty International, Atlantean Biosphere Program, the Centre for Responsible Travel, and the Travel Foundation, to educate the tourism industry on carbon reduction measures and the intersection of climate change and human rights. During a free webinar that was seen by over 800 industry executives across the travel industry. In August, together with the global animal welfare organisation, World Animal Protection, Intrepid launched a complementary animal welfare policy toolkit to encourage travel companies to take responsibility and put an end to the exploitation of wildlife in tourism and entertainment venues for good. The intention behind the initiative was to create an easily accessible way for tourism companies to implement more ethical wildlife practices into their business. Now, the resource included tips on how to draft and implement more animal-friendly practices within a tourism organisation, an animal policy template modelled off Intrepid's own business policy to get you started, and World Animal Protection's contact information for additional support, such as resources to help educate customers or staff. And on top of that, in September, our CEO, James Thornton, was the featured travel industry speaker for World Animal Protection's webinar, Why Travel Companies Should Become Elephant Friendly, to speak about the company's move to become animal friendly and offer advice to fellow businesses in tourism. And I think this section and what I really wanted to highlight here is that a big shift in the way we've gone about operating has been, traditionally we focused so heavily on ourselves. And I think over this time of the pandemic, we've really shifted to not only be continuing to improve ourselves, but to give access for other tourism companies to the work that we've done to open source that work so they can use this opportunity to themselves to better their organisations. Because we fundamentally identified that our impact can be so much bigger when we encourage other organisations, other people to take action and improve what they're doing. So it's been an incredibly big focus for us over the last couple of months. Now, with the pandemic's devastating impact on the tourism industry, for many companies, the loss in customers and revenues has meant shelving the nice-to-have projects to focus on only business-critical needs. Thankfully, as a B Corp certified company, business-critical projects at Intrepid, in addition to sales, marketing, and the like, are those that address larger environmental and social issues. Now, for those that don't know, B Corps are a new kind of business that create benefit for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. They are businesses that meet the highest standard of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance both profit and purpose. When we became a B Corp in 2018, it not only was our official pledge to be a responsible business, but it also served as a commitment to use travel and our business as a force for good. The certification has made us more dedicated and accountable than ever, fully realising and understanding our impact as a company. It changed our company for the better in so many ways, making us strive to be better and ensure we keep improving year after year. While our advocacy work continues, we also recognise that we must consider strategic change within our own organisation in order to continue to lead by example and ensure Intrepid continues to grow with purpose. One of the most pressing societal issues nations are facing globally right now is the divisive nature of our world and widespread racial injustice and inequality. This is why Intrepid took its most significant action yet in our commitment to support the Black Lives Matter movement and create tangible actions for Black, Indigenous, people of colour inclusion and representation in the company's entire value chain. In June, Intrepid made 4 public commitments that included adding a strand in our 7-point climate commitment on intersectional environmentalism so that our climate advocacy supports all marginalised communities. 2, introducing mandatory anti-racism training for all staff. 3, amplifying Black, Indigenous, people of colour voices in our marketing. And 4, committing to launch our Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan to build a fairer and more just Australia. From there, we have gone to work to make sure we turn these words into immediate actions. On July 2, 2020, Intrepid became the first global tour operator to achieve Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan status. And we're now moving on to phase 2 of our 4-stage commitment to reconciliation with Australia's First Nations people. Now in Australia, that's colloquially termed the RAP, Reconciliation Action Plan, RAP. The RAP tackles specific actions Intrepid will take to ramp up our commitment to reconciliation with First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in Australia, where our company is headquartered. And while Intrepid has been a carbon neutral company that has already been taking action on climate change for 15 years, we are choosing to take our commitment a step further, becoming the first tour operator in the world to set verifiable science-based emission reduction targets through the Science Based Targets Initiative. This independently assesses corporate emissions reduction targets in line with what climate scientists say is needed to meet the goals in the Paris Agreement. These provide Intrepid with a clearly defined pathway to future-proof growth by specifically identifying how much and how quickly the company needs to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to keep temperature rises within 1.5 degrees. The initiative, in partnership between CDP, the UN Global Compact, WRI and WWF, champions science-based target setting as a way of boosting companies' competitive advantage to transition to the low-carbon economy. And where I think this particular point is incredibly important, obviously carbon offsetting is really important, and it's one of the key things we need to do to reduce our emissions is to offset them and reinvest in regenerative projects. But we are not going to get to that, to staying under 1.5 degrees if we do not drastically reduce the emissions we emit. And this gives a very robust, very clear, very strong roadmap and guidelines how a company can go about doing this. Now, while organisational change and advocacy work is important to reimagining the future of travel, we also know we have to address our own product offerings for our travellers and suppliers in the new post-COVID world to ensure our own operations will continue to aid in the responsible rebuild of the tourism industry. This is why Intrepid has worked incredibly hard to create and develop and launch a new tour range called Intrepid Retreats. Now, these are a first for Intrepid, in which groups immerse themselves in one location in hand-picked accommodation with nearby experiences. The new trips celebrate slow travel and allow adventurers to engage with the surrounding communities away from the crowds and in more controlled setting with enhanced safety protocols, ideal for travel during the post-pandemic, or during and post-pandemic, sorry. The new itineraries are based in lesser known and visited locales, as to not contribute to the issue of over-tourism, and most importantly, have been designed to benefit and support local communities affected by the pandemic, while also providing enriching activities for travellers who have spent the majority of 2020 indoors. Now, my favourite example is on a retreat in Syros, Greece. Travellers get to visit a local family-owned business to see how lukumbia, a Greek version of Turkish delight, is made. While on a family retreat in Turkey, travellers visit a sea turtle rescue centre to learn about conservation efforts. So what is the industry we should be aspiring to on the other side of this crisis? We shouldn't be aspiring for things to go back to normal, but rather work to redefine what normal means. As an industry, we should be using this time as a rare chance to think how we travel and how we can aim to be more ethical and sustainable travellers and global citizens into the future. While it's up to all of us to be conscientious, globe-trotting individuals, it is truly the obligation and responsibility of business in the travel sector to make regenerative and sustainable tourism easier for consumers by building responsible travel fundamentals into every trip, flight, accommodation, and experience. The future of travel should be regenerative, responsible, ethical, sustainable, and fair for all. We must work together to leave lighter footprints, invest our travel dollars in local communities, show respect and curiosity for different cultures and traditions, and experience genuine connections with the people we meet along the way. Now, I hope you found learning about Intrepid's journey this year to be helpful. It is tourism students such as yourselves who are passionate about making this world a better place, who can and will affect real change in our industry and society. And I hope you leave here today feeling inspired. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to reach out on my contact details there, or follow me on Twitter, or reach out and ask me any questions. Thanks heaps, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Great, thank you, Leigh. Oh, why do I look so dark all of a sudden in here? That's weird. I don't know what happened there. I don't know. Okay, so I invite you guys to submit any questions you have for Leigh at this time using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I don't know what happened in here that made it so incredibly dark. Anyways, I'm going to start though with Leigh. Thank you very much. I want to hear more about all the great stuff that's going on. I think it's really amazing that you are being leaders and putting out to the rest of the world and to the industry, you know, how to do these things, because I think that's part of the barrier to all of this is, you know, companies might hear from, you know, they might hear from academics all the time, but they never really hear from other companies, and other companies don't share. And it always frustrated me that that wasn't the case. But before I get to talking about that, I guess what I wanted to ask you was, you know, in this pandemic, how do you lead a large global team through this pandemic? You know, how did you retain staff and keep them motivated? That, to me, I mean, sustainability we're going to get to in very much in depth, but that has been a burning question in my mind. Because you know, how do you get your you know, your people to remain engaged and passionate? I just saw Bex, you know, she posted, she's out there speaking, like you got some raw people on your team. So yeah, so tell us, you know, how do you keep them motivated and going?
Yeah, I suppose, look, it's tough, Sonia. There's no easy answer. There's no easy way. And I think to be you know, very transparent and open to it, it hasn't all been smooth sailing, and we have had to make hard decisions along the way as well, with a round of redundancies and having to change the size of our business. So it hasn't been all peaches and cream and clear sailing. But I think what has enabled us to keep our people engaged has been very brutal, open transparency. We've been incredibly transparent with our staff throughout this whole journey about what's been happening, both from a financial point of view, a travel borders point of view, our products, what's happening with our customers. Our CEO, James Thornton, every 2 weeks does a town hall meeting where he speaks and answers our staff's questions. So we've been incredibly transparent throughout the whole journey, and being very open and honest with our staff. Yeah, and I think that's been built up a lot of trust and a lot of goodwill with our people, and also it empowers them to get out and talk and be passionate about our organisation because they have the information that they need. And then I think beyond that transparency is to be a human. Yeah, this situation is bloody tough. It's hard, and everyone's reacting differently. You know, I've been cooped up here in Melbourne, I think now in my apartment for 3 months, and I haven't been fantastic every day. You know, I've struggled through this, and you know, you've got to be a real person, have sympathy and work with your staff, because this situation isn't easy. So I think by being real and being a human and working with your people around what challenges they're facing, being flexible, and just being a real human yourself to understanding what's going on. And I think those two things we've done incredibly well, being very transparent and then treated our people as people and engaged with them and talked and understand and tried to be as flexible as possible.
Because that's a big problem, right? I mean, people are going to be leaving the tourism industry, you know, if there isn't, like, how do you, you know, there's a lot of talent that is out there, and we have a lot of talents, like even in our school, but how do you keep them on, you know, past this year, you know, if tourism doesn't, how do you convince people to stick around in terms of tourism and to stay with you and not go off to, you know, banking or some other industry?
Yeah. No, it's a real challenge, and I think it's one that's
right.
It's going to become harder. I don't think this one's going to become easier, because you know, the reality is that we may not have open borders and travel back like we had at the start of this year, well until 2022. Yeah, and there's a reality with that. And some people might decide that it isn't the most appealing sector for them to go into. I think the things that I would reiterate and tell people is that it is an amazing sector to work into. The impact you can have is incredible. And I think now that opportunity will be bigger and better than ever. I think if you do get into a travel organization now, your opportunity and runway at that company is probably going to be bigger, faster than ever before. I think the sector is yearning out for new talent, different talent that brings a new voice. I think that this is the opportunity now that these people will get to come into organizations. And because a lot of companies have contracted, there will be significant upside and opportunity. So I think my advice is, obviously it is going to be tough. There's no sugarcoating that. And it is going to come with real realities, and it is going to be hard. It may not be smooth. It won't be smooth sailing, but I think it's a great, fun, interesting sector to be into that you can have really big impact, and your runway and opportunities over the next 18 months are going to be significant.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It is the impact. I mean, I think when we look at it from like the impact of tourism on things like poverty reduction, and, you know, you were talking equality, like, I don't think traditionally a lot of tourism industry businesses think that way, think of their impact, you know, in terms of what they can do for good. And so, you know, do you attract a lot of young talent or talent in general because of the type of company that you are, and the fact that you do focus on things like Black Lives Matters and Indigenous peoples, and, you know, being carbon neutral, like that those are incredible, you know, goals that you're going to achieve.
Yeah, it does. No doubt. People want to work for those things. I think one of the biggest changes in employment and interest to work with that mindset was when we became a B Corp. I think before, and maybe it was a change in also the demographic of people at that point wanting to come work. But the moment we became a B Corp 2 years ago, we fundamentally saw a shift, and people stating that the reason they were coming to work for Intrepid was that they were aiming to create value beyond just financial value for their shareholders. And it was mentioned time and time again, the fact that you're looking to be the best company you can be for your employees, the best company for the planet, the best company for your local community. These were really important things. And I think also too, it's not to say that we're perfect in any way, but the fact that when we do make a mistake, we're transparent about that. And that really resonates. And I think that's one of the key things that our company really over the last 2 years has focused on, both internally and externally, has been that transparency. And I think that that's really gotten staff and people wanting to come work for us, because people want to understand. They want to be built into the purpose. They want to know what your company's doing, why these decisions are made. So I think that moment we became a B Corp, we committed to transparency and delivering value beyond just financial value to shareholders, was a turning point, and it really has seen more staff, more people want to come work for Intrepid because of those attitudes and stances.
And just, can you give us just a brief background about what a B Corp is? And just because maybe not everyone on here knows what a B Corp is, and you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the first tourism B Corp?
No, the largest, yeah. So there was a couple of other smaller, tourism companies, some great tourism companies that signed on before us. But yeah, I think when you think about B Corp, some of the bigger brands that you'll know will be Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's. They're probably the two high-profile B Corps. Effectively, what it is accreditation and certification that says you're using your business as a force for good. Very simply, yeah. So that you're using your business beyond just creating cash for the people that own the organisation. And it's a very rigorous process where you have to go through and audit your complete business. So it's another way to look at it too is like an audit beyond just a financial audit. You know, you're auditing, you know, how you project yourself from a marketing point of view, how the impact you have on your customers, how you look after your people, what you're doing for the environment. And it goes through a very intense, quite a large questionnaire, and we had to go through and audit over 20 of our companies globally. It was quite an intense process. I think almost took us 2 years to do it. And it goes through and gives you a score, an impact score, and you've got to achieve over 80. And once you've got that, you're certified, B Corp have audited, signed off, and then you're able to use the B Corp stamp to say you use your business as a force for good. Why it is absolutely amazing and why we've found it so good, it's highlighted parts of our business where we need to get better. So one of a couple of the examples I use is that we have always spoken about our climate stance, yeah, and we've done a lot of work to be carbon neutral. But the B Corp process highlighted we were not doing enough in the places where we had our offices. Yeah, what was the type of water we're using? Were we using solar power? What was our actual office and impact? And we've been just sort of a bit ignorant, I think, to that point, saying, oh, we're doing all this other stuff about our trips. But hang on a second, we've got 2,000 employees globally. They can have an incredibly big impact as well. What are you doing to you know, work with your partners to create change? What are you doing in your contracting with the suppliers on the ground? So it really exposed us to some tough conversations, but we wouldn't have had those tough conversations, and it's now making our company better. So I think that's what we've really found is it's effectively like an audit for the non-financial parts of your business, and it gives you that lens around what areas you need to be better as an organization, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a question from Aggie Wyhill. She's a professor at Vancouver Island University, and she does a lot of work in Africa. So how important is reciprocity with local citizens, operators, and destinations to Intrepid's operations?
Right, so you just dropped out there, and I think the key part of the question, can you repeat that,
sorry.
please?
How important is reciprocity with local citizens, operators, and destinations to Intrepid's operations?
Yeah, huge. I think that's one of the key things. And I think, Sonya, we've spoken a lot about that impact conference we were at earlier in the year. We've got to work with the communities that we interact with. If we don't have healthy, engaged communities, we don't have a tourism product. And if we do, it's not a great one. And I think it's an area we're continuing to get better at. And I think we'll see the whole sector really move towards this. And I know I've seen a lot of tourism boards and marketing organizations starting to change how they promote or work with destinations. I think one of the coolest examples I've seen has been Victoria, and the fact that instead of marketing and promoting the destination, they're actively spending their money on how they can make that community healthier, more engaged, and by virtue of that becomes a better tourism product, which then people promote on social media. So an example is a decrease in their orca population. So they've gone about investing money into a feeding program, which has now increased the health and well-being of the orcas, which has brought more orcas back to Victoria, which means more tourists, which has brought more promotion. And because there's that symbiotic relationship with the community, it's actually made a better environment and community, which has made it a more interesting, engaging tourism product. So yeah, it is incredibly important. We do a number of different things to engage and interact with the community. And I think moving forward, it's going to be an even bigger part, because just like we need a healthy planet to have a healthy tourism sector, we need healthy, engaged communities that actually want tourism, and they're great places to live.
Definitely. And that really reflects when you go into a community, especially as someone like Intrepid, because a lot of now your businesses are focused on the community connection. So you want community to want you to be there, and you want them to be happy and flourish. And speaking of orcas, they had babies. So we've just had, those orcas just had some babies. So last year was a big story about the orcas baby dying, and it was really sad. And now the orca just had a baby. So it's pretty exciting. So, you know, really good example, right? About you know, Aggie brought up another question, and maybe this is something else you could speak to in relation to this, but with the conservation movement, there have been discussions about the problem of under-tourism. And do you think that this may empower destinations to promote the return to mass tourism in conservation areas? I guess that's really the fear. Like, is it now that, you know, tourism hasn't been, you know, people's livelihoods are suffering because tourism has disappeared? You know, is there going to be more, you know, mass tourism, or, you know, tourism that's sustainable in particular areas?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Look, I think it'd be naive of us to think that just because the pandemic's come, that everything's going to be better on the other side. Yeah, I think that there's going to be opportunities for people and organisations to do the wrong thing. Yeah, I think that will be some exploitative practices. So yeah, I think it's a risk. Yeah, I do think there are concerns on how we come back from this, and I think that's why we've been so passionate in trying to champion companies to rebuild responsibly. But yeah, I think that there is some risk around what happens in the tourism sector when it rebounds, that people, will be just craving to get back to Croatia. I want to go to Morocco, and what's going to happen when those floodgates open? So I think that is an interesting conversation that we're going to have. I don't have a clear answer on that. It's something we're discussing at the moment, but we keep on getting, it's quite interesting. We keep talking about what's going to happen when we reopen, but we're so having to pivot with the short-term stuff that's happening. We've just seen labels like Turkey's now off the list for British travellers. So there's just so much pivoting and changing. But yeah, I don't know if I've answered that question, but I do think there's a risk of it, and it's something we'll need to address, but it's probably not something we're fully fleshed out from our point of view, but hopefully not, but I see such a pent-up demand, and I see, we're seeing more people interested in more unique wildlife experiences than we've ever before. A high amount of people are still coming to our website asking about, seeing the gorillas, going to Antarctica, trekking to Everest Base Camp. So I see that the want, I think what we'll see from consumer base is the want for those epic experiences to jump. I don't think we'll have people doing 3-4 holidays. I think we'll see people doing one really big all-in holiday to one of those experiences with a lot of domestic travel. So I think we'll see drastic increase in domestic travel with the increase in one really big hero trip rather than several international trips, which we're seeing with the low discount air operators. So I do think there is a risk, because people will be saying, I want to go to this, top 10 thing, and we could see more people than that destination can handle. So I think it's an interesting topic and good question. I think I've just given a lot of my thoughts on it, but I don't have a particular stance around it.
What are people booking currently? What's you guys are booking into 2022, right?
Yeah, big trends, like I said, Antarctica, a lot of interest for Antarctica, and then a lot of interest for anything outdoors. I think I mentioned on my talk that there's a lot of pent up people who've been indoors, but, people going to the Galapagos, people going to Machu Picchu, Everest, really big interest in wildlife in Africa. So I think that we'll see people just desperate to get out and to connect and to walk and to breathe and be away from their devices. So we're seeing that increase. And then just, practically domestic tourism. We'll see that continue for the next two years, I reckon, where people are just looking to travel in their own backyard.
As I think that's always a very good idea. And I mean, for me, that's you always want to see the other side to things. And I think that now, I know in Canada, people are starting to Canadians are discovering Canada. We all went away, to wherever this summer, and really realizing what we have. And I think that if we're going to focus on sustainability and climate change, we really need to travel in our backyard, and keep ourselves more to domestic travel versus 16 trips. I remember asking my students one year how many times they went on a plane, and the average was 16. And it just blew my mind that, this is right. This is what the norm was.
Yeah, I think that'll change, but people will still travel. That won't stop. There's that want to connect. So it'll be, I think, the how and where that mix will change, but the appetite to go connect, explore isn't going away.
Well, and that's the purpose of regenerative travel, right? Is to have people have those connections. That is the purpose of travel, I think. Okay, question from George, lovely George. For a long time, social and environmental justice have been treated as two separate entities. With that being said, how do we move away from this misconception and create actionable steps towards intersectional environmentalism?
Good question. You could write a whole paper. You could write a whole paper on that one. That's the start of it. Yeah, look, I think a couple of points. One, we've got to admit that it was an issue. I think that wasn't the case. We were looking at them as two very separate, and the whole sector was. Everyone, I think it was starting to come into academia and some parts that it was, clear that there was people that were more disadvantaged and at risk from climate change. But I really think that that's been on warp speed. I think one of the trends we've seen is basically every part of business and sustainability has sped up 5 years. And I think the fact that now we're talking about the intersectionality and the fact that, you know, certain sets of people are more at risk from climate change and have to deal with its issues day in, day out in a way that a lot of people do not. And it's impacting, you know, all sorts of different ways in our lives, from real estate prices to food availability, scarcity. So it's already here, but I don't think we were talking about it. So step one was actually acknowledging that it was an issue and happening, and we've seen that happen. Also, we're seeing companies take action on it. We're now looking at how we best service that. We haven't done a great job of this yet. We need to get better at it. So we're looking at that now. So companies are taking action. I think you've seen Patagonia as well. Ben and Jerry's have been incredibly outspoken on this particular topic. So you've now got companies making change in their businesses. And then I think also too, we'll see, hopefully we see some more governments taking action around sustainability and also this part around intersectionality. So I don't have a magic bullet. I think it's better now that we're talking to it, addressing it, and I probably will have more answers on what the work looks like and what things we need to do to make that happen over the next 6 to 12 months as we dive into that. But I think key things for me, it's been addressed, it's open, it's happening, it's talking about. Companies are now working on solutions, and I think the next step will be hopefully governments picking this up and, you know, starting to put in place responsible actions as well.
You mentioned your reconciliation action plan. Now, is that something that many companies in Australia are working on, or is this something that you guys are at the forefront? Is this something the government has been mandating you to work on? Like, where did the, you know, reconciliation action plan?
I think it's one of the things that we have done as a nation well in our reconciliation process. We are lucky enough to have a body called Reconciliation Australia, and their mandate is to work on Australia to reconcile with its First Nations people. And put in place processes, steps and actions that enable us to do that. And one of the really great things that they've done is put together a framework around how an organisation can take steps to reconcile. And there's 4 steps, four very clear steps that you need to take, and you need to put out comprehensive business plans. I can share our wrap, Sonya, with you after this, so you can share it with your students. But it is a complete plan that goes through, again, every part of our business, to how we hire, how we market the business, how we represent, and then how we do things like that acknowledgement of country that I did at the start. It encourages us to promote, encourages us to employ and engage with the First Nations community. And we've done a number of changes, from, you know, looking at employee programs. We have the acknowledgement for country. We've built in more First Nation Indigenous experiences into our product, but it actually gives you a clear runway to understand how you go about making improvements. And it's a program. You sign up to it. There's a number of different Australian companies that have signed up. Qantas is one that is and a number of our local Australian rules football teams. But it's really about imbuing First Nations people into your business, reconciling and engaging with the community. So it's been an incredibly rewarding program. I've learned a hell of a lot about my nation, about where I live. And, you know, I think one of the things that I've been incredibly amazed by and taken back and humbled by is how open the community has been and how willing they've been to guide and give us advice, and that we aren't in this alone. So yeah, so to answer your question, great program. I'll share it so you guys can have a look through it. You know, it's really cool stuff too, where we've engaged, you get to go engage a First Nations artist to develop the artwork, and they help tell the Intrepid story through their eyes, and you get this amazing piece of artwork. We've got a really big piece of artwork that tells the Intrepid story that was done by a local Indigenous artist. So it's really ingraining that culture, learning, and people into your business.
So Aggie just asked a question that was on the tip of my tongue, but is there going to be a similar reconciliation plan for other countries that you work in, i.e. Canada, or plans to develop one?
Yeah, it's something we've been discussing and looking at. There isn't the same formalised process, and one of the things that we don't want to do is, or there might be, we just haven't found them. So if you know any, if you have for Canada, or if there's any formalised process, please share. I think, Sonya, we had some conversations earlier about this. But yeah, we would love to. I just don't want to take what's been here for Australia and say that this is the right Indigenous way to do this in Canada or in Vietnam or in Peru, because those peoples and First Nations people in those countries may want different things. So we're just trying to work out how we go about doing that process. We would love to. We've got Indigenous guides around how we interact globally, but it's something we're looking to do. So if Sonya or anyone in Canada, if you know a way, there's some guidelines on how we might achieve this in Canada, I'm very open to look at it and see how we can do it.
Great. And I think G has also done some work on this. Kelly's on this call as well, but she's been doing some stuff on this as well. There's a question from Lauren. How is Intrepid currently working during this pandemic to ensure the safety of their customers and those providing the customers with experiences at the given destination?
Yeah, good question. It's ever evolving and changing as we learn more and more about the virus. And it's also, I think, different country by country has different laws and regulations. So it's been a complex process. You can imagine if you're traveling to 120 different countries. Obviously, we haven't been at the moment. One of the key things that we've done was we were part of the team that put together the WTTC Safe Travels protocols. So we worked intensively with the WTTC to put those together. We have implemented those in our business, and they cover everything from cleaning to respiratory, transport, interaction on the ground. So we've implemented those safe protocols, and we've helped work with WTTC to develop those protocols. And then we're continuing to update and change them as we learn more about the virus. I think that's another interesting thing too. I think when we first started looking at traveling, masks were, they were sort of not being recommended at that point. Now it's seen as the key way to help protect you against the virus. So we've got, masks, we have, cleaning protocols in place, changes to transport, all those different things, how we do hospitality, what the hotels are doing from cleaning, working with them to ensure there's deep cleaning taking place. So it's been a quite in-depth process. And I think one of the things too that's quite interesting is the nuances in every country. So we've just run a trip in Daintree in Queensland, and there's no community transition of the virus in Queensland. So on the trip, they weren't required to wear masks. Yeah, so there's just different components on that where in different countries and cultures, they're managing the virus differently. So we've had to tailor the program to what's happening in that country too. Yeah. In Queensland, on that trip, it was only open to Queensland travellers. So there was no international travel because Australia's borders are still pretty hard closed at the moment. So yeah, working with WTTC on safe travel protocols, working on the ground with local government to ensure that what we're doing is in line with what's happening in that country, and working with our staff and leaders on the ground to what they need and expectations point of view. We have a questionnaire at the start that the leaders are involved with to understand what's happening. We have a briefing that talks to them about safety. We have cleaning, increased cleaning protocols, masks, all those things that take place. So it's been in depth and it's ongoing and changing. I think what we're doing today will be different again in January because the virus and our education around it is drastically changing and developing. And I think we'll see too what the governments and what the airlines are doing as well change. I think, hopefully we'll see rapid testing at airports and different airlines. So these things are going to change and really affect what we do on the ground. And another thing too, it's interesting for a tour operator is we're part of quite a diverse supply chain. We don't run the restaurant, we don't run the hotel, we don't drive the bus. So how do we work with all these different partners and all their different safety protocols and ensure that they're up to standard for what we need? So it's been very consultative and quite a large undertaking.
Yeah, I mean it's a whole new way of doing business, right? They just announced a new rapid test that Air Canada is on board with. There was an article, Frederick spoke about it today in his article. And as you said, like things are rapidly changing so quickly and people really want to still get out there. I just had a conversation with my mom and she's super excited that she found insurance to cover her, potential COVID risks. And because they're snow bunnies and they want to go back to their home in Florida in the winter. But, these are the conversations that people are having and everyone's kind of chomping at the bit. And I think it's really interesting that you guys, Mikey mentioned this to me as well. So did your organization do a pivot in the sense that you really started focusing on your local trips? And was it just Australia or are you doing local trips like in all your countries?
Yeah, no, it has been quite a large pivot. Traditionally, we've been a outbound tourism operator. We've had some domestic product, but normally catering to, Canadians or Brits going to the USA or Americans and Canadians going to Australia, as opposed to Canadians in Canada, Australians in Australia. One of the big focuses for us has been to launch a domestic travel program. We've launched a range of those retreats, which I spoke to, which have been in traditional local areas in the UK, in Europe, and in Australia. We're actively working and building a product range in for North America. We've got some exciting winter trips that will be coming up in Canada and the USA, and also for a domestic range for next summer. So that's been incredibly cool. There's been a large appetite. I think one of the hard things we've had, and this has been probably for all of our international travel, is just how fast the virus changes and the requirements province by province, state by state. Because we launched domestic trips here in Australia, great fanfare, good bookings, and the next week the government's closed some of the states down. And the same thing we've seen in Europe and the UK with movement around those countries. So yeah, we've pivoted. We've had a really big focus on domestic product and in supporting communities in those domestic countries that need the tourism dollar, because we're all hurting from that point of view. And we're going to continually rapidly launch somewhere between 40 and 60 more domestic trips in the USA, Canada, the UK and Australia over the next couple of months. And we'll continue to rapidly develop, create, innovate new products in these markets, and ensure that we're creating products for our travellers so they can continue to travel with Intrepid in their backyards.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really, really great for people, especially in Canada, because, I think one of the biggest barriers to travel in Canada is actually the organization and getting places. If you live in the city, you don't always have a car. And as Frederick, our director, is French, and he always says to go anywhere is 5 hours. So for him, if he doesn't have a car to get out to somewhere 5 hours away, is really difficult. But if there was something that was organized and people also don't know, like what's happening in Sault Ste. Marie or in Sudbury or in Manitoulin Island, for example, that are all in close areas. And so there really is that need, I think, for, domestic trips where people can feel comfortable and confident to be go out and go to some of these far away as in, everybody can hop on a plane for 20 hours, but to, get out to the wilderness is a little more difficult here.
And it's an amazing experience in your backyard too. Like just myself being in Australia, there's so many forests and lakes and mountains that I never heard of, and now I'm looking to go see. So I think hopefully during this pandemic gives us a chance to reset and see some of those amazing local experiences.
Yeah. So Rachel has a very good question. So you mentioned travel to Antarctica. How do you overcome the ethics of the climate impact by taking people to these vulnerable areas?
Yeah, great question. And it's one of those hot topics we have conversations at our leadership team. I think, we've had a number of conversations around how we do this better. At the moment, the fuel on a lot of the Antarctica boats is not up to scratch yet. The actual boats are not where they need to be. So to help offset that, we've committed to double offsetting all of our Antarctica cruises to double invest in regenerative carbon projects. We've partnered with a number of different organisations to help get this better and to help ensure the conservation of wildlife in Antarctica. We have a partnership where we're one of the key sponsors and partners of the Antarctic Science Foundation in Australia that invests into research into wildlife and climate change in Antarctica. So investing our money into help that preservation. And they also have citizen science that takes place on the vessel, so where you can go learn and be involved in part of that process. We also have a partnership with WWF where we've worked to help raise funds for a whale conservation program. So I think it's the acknowledgement that the product isn't perfect yet, that we need to make serious sustainability improvements, and we're working hard to look at what we do for our next boat and contracting and building and all these things around how we get a more sustainable product. The second is, because we know that, we need to do everything we can to minimise that impact and make sure that it goes beyond just minimising it. So investing into research, investing into conservation. And the other thing too is really empowering, educating our customers to see how important Antarctica is, so they go away as passionate advocates for the destination and they do their bit to help educate, conserve and get other people passionate about protecting it. So not perfect, but doing everything we can to minimise and go beyond that minimisation and provide research to ensure that it is a destination into the future.
And I mean, I always like that model in terms of the research-centric model, where you're also then supporting researchers, because as a researcher, that's really difficult for us to be able to get out, you know, and have the facilities to use, such as the boats. And then for you guys, it provides such a great experience, you know, for the tourist. I really I understand, you know, what research is on the ground. So I think though, in relation to carbon, like in relation to the fact that you guys are going carbon neutral, like, can you share some of that plan, like some of the concrete plan and strategy? I mean, other than, as you said, it's beyond carbon offsetting, but I'm sure there's a resource somewhere, but you know, I'm fascinated by the fact that you guys are, you know, have a strategy to go carbon neutral, and how are you actually going to get there?
Yeah, so we have been carbon neutral. So backtrack, we have been carbon neutral since 2000 and about 15 years, I think. So yeah, so we have been carbon neutral and been doing that for quite a long time. What we're looking to do is to get to net zero emissions.
Oh, net zero.
Yeah, so there's a number of different things which I'll talk to. One of the key fundamentals in my point of view from any purpose sustainability initiative is understanding your impact. Yep. So number one, you've got to understand if you have a good or bad impact. So what we do is have quite a rigorous, and I believe Susanna Eddy, who is our environmental specialist, is actually listening. So hopefully I get this right, Susanna, or you can grill me afterwards. But is understanding your impact. Yeah. So measurement. We do a hell of a lot of work to measure and understand the factors that go into how much carbon we create. Yep. Is it good? Is it bad? What trips create a lot? What trips don't? And how do we make improvements? So number one, understand the impact, yeah, good, bad, or otherwise, and then we move to make improvements. So can we improve that trip? Can we make that trip less carbon intensive? What things can we change on that trip? How can we make that trip a better product for the customer, but also a better product for the company, for the planet? So we make those changes and do the measurement piece around it. The next piece is, because we can't fully minimize the impact that that trip has, we offset. Yep, so we invest in carbon credits to projects that help regenerate or offset that carbon. Things like windmills, things like forest regeneration, a number of other programs that are out there, and we make sure that they're up to a certain standard, a gold standard. And we then say, from our measurement, this is how much carbon we created. We are now going to invest in these projects. Yep. So we do that offsetting piece. We also then, as I said, looking at how we minimize it. From that piece, so if I break it down simply, understand your impact, minimize, improve. Then we believe in advocacy, yeah, as a positive change point. So we do a hell of a lot of work from an advocacy point of view, and I spoke to a lot of that on my talk around how we advocate for other companies to make this change as well. So we believe our impact can be much larger when we get other companies to make this change. Mm-hmm. The next piece is a number of other things. So the next thing beyond advocacy is we're signed up to, I said in that conversation earlier, around science-based targets. Now, this is an initiative of the UN and WWF. And it sets targets for your business to decarbonise. Yep. So we need to get to a certain level to stay under 1.5 degrees. And it goes through all the factors of our business. It projects what we're going to be if we don't do anything today. So what point by 2030, if we didn't do anything, how much carbon will be created if our growth of customers is going to get there? And it says that can't be the case. We need to get away to get it down to a certain level that's going to help contribute to ensure that we're under the 1.5 degrees. And then it sets out a plan to say, hey, you need to change this part of the trip. We need to remove this part of from your office. You need to go to solar power here. And it gives us a clear plan on the things we need to do. It's not easy, and some of these things are going to be bloody tough for us to get there, but it goes through how we go about decarbonising our business and using less carbon intensive things to run our business. Yeah, so it gives us a clear mapping of, do you remove your flight from this trip? Can you use a train? Do you have to have better waste program in your office? What solar solutions you're using? And gives us that full breadth on how we go about it. And it also, as part of that, encourages us to continue to advocate as well. How do we change our suppliers? How do we change our partners? How do we get more companies to take this on? So that's an overview of it there. We do have a clear 7-step guide that goes through it. We've also declared a climate emergency. And we've done a number of other activations that help raise awareness and ensure our business improves in this space. So yeah, very simply, understand your impact, take action to minimize that impact, and then promote and advocate like crazy for the cause that you think are important to the planet.
But do you not get any criticism about, going to like long haul trips,
Yep.
focusing on things like long haul trips, like Antarctica, which is extremely vulnerable to climate change, and the fact that, you can't not take a long haul flight
Yep.
to Antarctica. So how do you minimize some of your, the people that go there? Is it a very limited, group? How do you manage that? Like you can't just, and maybe you can, I don't know, but do you just let anybody go to Antarctica, or are they, very small groups? Like,
Yes,
I guess it's just hard to kind of, we hear what you're saying, but then at the same time, it's like, and then how do you then account for these, very vulnerable destinations that are vulnerable to climate change, but you can't take away your flight?
Yeah, 100% we get backlash. And it's, again, something that we struggle with. We know that we contribute, carbon by having a tourism business, and we all do in this room by being part of tourism. Yeah, it is the elephant in the room. And I said earlier, we won't have a vaccine for it. So what do we do? I'm going to say for Antarctica is we do have limited numbers. We run a smaller ship. Yeah, we don't have one of the biggest vessels there. We carbon offset the flights. Yeah, so if we have any flights in our product, we offset. That's not perfect, but it is important. The WTTC has recognised that it's one of the clear levers we can have to help minimise the impact. And then we look at ways on how we reduce the carbon emissions. So again, acknowledgement it's not perfect. Do whatever we can to minimise it through offsetting, and then look to make improvements. And then so that's the way we manage it. It's not ideal. And then, we, as I said, advocate for positive change. But there is a knowledge that it isn't a perfect solution, and we do get backlash.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think, coming from, academics, where we fly, well, before COVID, we flew often to go to conferences and to do research. And there is also that conundrum, right? Like I get asked that question all the time. Like, how do you reconcile that? You're flying over to Indonesia to do some climate change research on an island. But your impact is through flying, and we do that all the time. And so it is a really difficult thing. And perhaps the advocacy really comes in to push the suppliers, push the airline industry to come up with some other solutions than being so carbon intensive, and looking at, all your systems, because really that's just one piece, right? I mean, it is the biggest piece, but you have to look at all your systems.
And then also too, signing up to something like the Science-Based Targets Initiative mandates that you need to make these changes. Yeah, so we are actively making these changes and trying to improve. So it's not putting our head in the sand. It's saying, look, we need to get better at this, and what are the tools and ways that you understand and get better. And it was one of the things I was actively trying to do as executive at a travel company. I was trying to travel less. When I did travel, I would go rather than a week, go for a month. And spend, rather than doing 3 or 4 trips to that destination for business, go once. So you have to make changes, and look, it's not perfect, but you've got to admit it. You've got to make changes, then you've got to sign up to things that ensure that you do make change. And I think that's what I'm probably pressing here is, it's not perfect, but what things can you sign up and commit to that are going to make you haul ass and make change, like B Corp, like science-based targets, like a reconciliation and action plan. We are not perfect. These things help you get there and make improvements. So yeah, again, if you looked at all our actions around reconciliation, we're not perfect and we don't do everything right, but we're committed to getting there and getting better. So I think that's what I'm sort of advocating for, is understand it, minimize it, find ways to improve, and then get out there and communicate the change you want to see.
And that's part of your transparency as well, right? To admit, like, we're not perfect. We are a travel company. We travel.
This is an annual report. This report here. So this is full transparency. It's integrated report, and it goes through every part of our business and gives you full transparency from financials, how much carbon we've emitted, modern slavery reporting. It's all in there, and it's a full transparent look for our staff and our customers and the sector. So I recommend, if you want to have a look at the numbers and stuff behind what I'm saying, it's all in there.
I think a lot of people, we did have someone mention that they really wanted to see Jane, who's from an international NGO. She would love to see some of the resources that you, if you could provide us with a link later, and we could share with the attendees, because they want this, people want this information, and she thinks it would be really helpful to the organizations and her partners. And yes, Jane, we will definitely get Leigh to send us the links to that and share that further, because that's the point of that work.
100%.
Carol Greenwood also mentioned, just I guess for your Ontario work or work within Canada, but Ontario, that Destination Ontario and Destination Northern Ontario do a good job in terms of promoting Ontario. And perhaps there's an opportunity to have the 13 regional tourism organizations speak to Intrepid if you're developing some of your
for sure. Yeah,
Ontario
Sonia,
work.
that would be great. If Carol does work there, if you're able to put me in touch with her after this, that would be fantastic. I would be very keen to see what we might be able to do and learn, for sure.
Yeah, great. And she said happy to do so. Thanks, Carol. And a question from Shivraj. How do you measure sustainability for individual tourists and encourage sustainable consumer behavior during trips?
Well, first part of that question, we don't have a mechanism right now. It's actually one of the things we've looked into from a B Corp point of view. So one of the areas where B Corp have shown that we need to get better is some of that measurement point of view. So measuring what the impact, positive and negative, of the individual person was on the trip. So we don't have a clear formula for that. And I don't know, it's going to be tough, but it's something we're looking at. So no answer on that one, but it is acknowledged and we're working on it. What we do to encourage our people and our staff is education. Yeah, I think to take a step back, we know that the main reason people travel with us initially is because of the product, the date, the itinerary, and the price. So a lot of the time, sustainability doesn't come into the decision-making process when they're booking their first with Intrepid. What we know is when they take their second, third, fourth, and fifth trip, sustainability, purpose, or responsible rises from not being on their decision-making process to the top three. Yep, so we know that there's a fundamental shift from when they make a decision the first time to the second, third, and fourth time. But one of the key levers on why they travel with Intrepid again and again is our sustainable business practices. So what we aim to do is educate. Yeah, we have a number of educational tools on our digital platforms, just like we do for the sector, guides on how to be more responsible, how to interact with communities, plastic consumption, all those things we give guides to. Our leaders on the ground do a lot of work around educating the travellers around responsible tourism. So in our briefings, in our conversations and explanations around the tourism experience, we try and stay and use, responsible product, use local transport, all of these things. So the actual trip itself is a very educational experience. And then once they come back and they've engaged and they're in our ecosystem, following us on social media, signed up to our email, we continue to talk about and engage around what we're doing. So recently on our social media, which a lot of our customers would follow, we spoke around our commitment to the Black Lives Matters movement and the steps that we were taking. We launched our reconciliation action plan and sent that out via email so our customers could see and engage and learn. So we do a lot of work from an advocacy and education point of view to continue to talk to those customers. And then we know once they travel with us again and again, that it becomes more important to them and we start to see change behaviours from that.
Great. So I am curious about, the barriers, right? So one thing that I research a lot is barriers, like other companies. So if companies here are listening, if other industries are here, or, us as researchers, us as students that we're working for different companies, there's so many reasons. So let me backtrack. So I find this whole thing of sustainability maddening, only because, I have been working within sustainability in the tourism industry for over 20 years. And I feel like not much has happened. There's one-offs like your company and G and, a couple other really good companies, but generally the tourism industry as a whole has been really not even slow. Like we're talking like dinosaur slow. Like it's just not, there just hasn't really been a lot of movement. And so I am very concerned that with COVID, that it's actually going to take a step back further. So it's really exciting to hear a lot of what you're doing. But, if you think about like, how did you guys overcome some of these barriers? How did you guys pivot to, it's always kind of been part of your ethos, but, you hit a pandemic, you stopped your travel, right? But then you decided to focus on advocacy and sharing what you guys have been doing. Now, if you were to sit in a room with a bunch of CEOs of travel companies, what would be your biggest pieces of advice to overcome these barriers, especially in relation to COVID, where people are, you know, trying to figure out how to stay alive, you know, versus
Yeah. I think it's a great question, Sonia. And again, it's another one you can write from the big thesis on and go into. Look, morbidly or strangely, I think your last point there hits it, is people are trying to stay alive. And I think there's two things here. I think what the perception is in travel is that you can't do good stuff and still be a profitable business. Yeah. And what ours is, and I think you're right, we're lucky that fundamentally our co-founders and our leadership team fundamentally believe in this stuff. Yep. So that's a tick. Yeah. We don't have to change the exact level. So there is a difference in the way we act and think, because that is built in and brought into our business. But I think the thing that we are advocating for and what we've found is that by having both a purpose and profit, it has made both parts of our business better. The more purposeful work we do, the more profit we make. The more profit we make, the more money we've been able to put into our purpose initiatives. And I think that's what's been very clear and what we do not shy away from, why we haven't stepped back from our sustainability practices during this pandemic, because it is part of our company being a success. And if we can't ensure that there's a travel industry in 30 years, that there aren't places to go see, communities that want us there, we don't have a product. Yeah, the fact that we have a product where we don't technically make something, that if we do not have a forest to go see, we do not have an animal to go see, we don't have a community that wants us there, we don't have a product. So how the hell are you going to be profitable? Yeah, so if you don't engage in a way to sustain these things, prove and ensure that the communities want you, that there's a planet to see, what business are you going to have and how profitable are you going to be? You're not. Yeah, so I think for us that those two things are symbiotic, they stand together, and we need to be doing both. We also need to be profitable to be a long-term sustainable business. We want to be around for over 100 years. So we've got to make sure both of those things work together. And we've seen over the last 4 years before the pandemic that we had record year after record year of both raising funds to go through our foundation, increasing the amount of impact and advocacy work we're having, and our profit. So I'd be saying to those companies, if you want to be more profitable into the future, you want to get more investment from outside, you want to get more customers that engage and care about your product, do the work to understand your impact, improve it, and minimize it, and you'll be more profitable. So I wouldn't be shying away from those two things. I think they're both important for long-term sustainable success. And yeah, I think the travel industry, more than any other sector, needs communities that want it and needs a planet so we can go see and experience it. Otherwise, there is no sector. It's pretty brutal and simple, I think, at the long and short of it. And we're here to build a business that's going to be around for 100 years, not just the 30 we've been around for.
Mm-hmm. And so do you guys practice, you know, in terms of, you know, high yield tourism versus, you know, having, you know, so many people going to a destination, really focusing on them staying for longer periods of time? Like, is that what you guys were thinking with this retreat?
Yeah, this manifests itself in heaps of different ways, Sonia. There's not like we don't have one lever on this, but you know there'll be things like we know that, say, Barcelona is too overcrowded. So rather than spending the 2 or 3 days there, we go and see it for the afternoon, engage, see the restaurant, go over the thing, and then we go and stay somewhere else where it doesn't have that same tourism, pressure. The same thing with the local retreats was to take them to different places that were under tourists, that didn't have the same visitor numbers, to get people into those communities. And we look at levers around nights. How many nights do we stay there? What experiences as well? I think that's another thing too, is selecting the experiences you have in that location is an important part of it. So there's not just one magic bullet, Sonia, to say, hey, we don't go there. There's a number of levers within that to say, you know, within that destination, there might be a great experience that's being underutilized and needs that money and visitation and protection and engagement. So how do we go see it? Where can we stay longer that gives a better experience to the customer, but also gets that money and support into a different part of the community? So there's a number of different levers that we pull, and it's something we discuss all the time. You know, at what point will we have to stop visiting a destination? You know, should we be going here? We have these conversations. I think one of the earlier examples was how rapidly the floating markets changed in Thailand. We had a really big focus on them when we first started traveling, and we've since removed that as that's changed and developed. And, you know, I think it's a number of different levers. It changes over time, and we're trying to pull those to ensure that we are contributing. We don't always get it right, but it's recognizing and making changes to that product to help combat under tourism and battle over tourism at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna take, are you there, Leigh, or did you freeze?
I'm still here, hopefully.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
hopefully.
So we'll take from Fergus. We just have probably time for another question or two. What is your ideal? Sorry, we're peppering you with questions. We just love it.
I've got two, Sonya. I've had no gimmies. I've had to like really think them out. I'm like, they've been good.
Hey, if I'm going to get you up and on at 8 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne, I'm going to get your brain going.
Yeah, good. I like it.
What is your ideal broad-based scenario for tourism's recovery and regeneration for destinations? And how can businesses like Intrepid support that? Just answer all the world's problems right now.
Oh, jeez. God, that's a big question.
Yeah.
What do I want to say? Look, I think the biggest thing for me, and this is an inflection point, was recently I spoke at the New York Times Travel Show, and I got up on a podium with CEOs and CMOs of some of the biggest travel companies in the world, from cruise ships to travel agencies, etc. And I'd been going to the New York Times Travel Show for 6 or 7 years, and I'd gone from speaking on a back corner stage about sustainability to about 20 people in one of the small booths tucked away underneath the main stage. Well, now I was on the main stage. There's probably 1,000 people being recorded, prime time, one of the main speaking sessions. And every single one of those companies said the number one trend and challenge for their business was sustainability. Now, that's the shift in 5 years, which is probably a bit different to your point earlier in the barriers, but geez, that's a massive shift. Like the fact that these companies 5 years ago were all talking, the number one keynote speech would have been around revenue management or something along those lines. It would have been how to build a boat faster, or just totally different things around it. But the number one keynote speech and panel that day was around sustainability. So what is my vision for it? One is that all of these companies do take it as seriously as they project, that they are doing integrated reports, they are taking action to understand, measure, and improve, that they're all advocating. Geez, I'd love it if all these hotels, everyone was out advocating for climate change and doing their bit, because we'd see change at a government level if all these businesses were actually, fundamentally fighting it. So I want to see all these companies not only talking about it, but taking action. And I think that for me, outside of the recovery of COVID, would be an amazing first step. Yeah, and that would be step one, because without the companies saying it and making public statements, they're not actually going to be doing it. So I think for me, that would be what I'd like to see come out of it. And I'm probably more positive. I'm probably more concerned about the unintended consequences that will happen over the next 18 months, where we don't know because if we're stopped traveling or when we start up, there's going to be unintended consequences. And I'm probably more worried about that. But my vision would be for companies to all be taking action, to putting reports out there, to committing to becoming B Corps, to committing to a reconciliation action plan, committing to science-based targets, and then actually doing the work. And if we do that, we're going to see pretty drastic change from a sustainability tourism point of view.
Let's hope. That would be a dream, wouldn't it?
No more barriers, Sonya. No more barriers. They're gone.
Then I would have to change my research. So would you like to wrap up with anything, any last words in terms of Intrepid, in terms of philosophy, what you're doing, what we can be doing? There's people on here from industry and from academia and from not-for-profits, well, first of all, what resources do you want to tell us about that we can go and see? And second of all, where should we be heading in terms of a direction, in terms of travel and, our own personal use perhaps, and our own lives? I think, putting onuses on companies is one thing, but, what about, do you have any thoughts in terms of purchasing, and, should we all be looking for only to purchase from B Corps?
Yes. No, I think where should we be heading? We should all be heading to the wilderness. First thing is my passion for getting out and walking. So your first holiday, make sure you get out and connect with the wild, go for a walk. I think that's my first thing, is look after yourself. This thing has been tough on you personally. So I'd encourage everyone to not be so hard on yourself. Take some time and go for a walk in the wilderness. One of my first trips will be to Patagonia or Nepal or out to the outback of Australia and just connect and go. So my first piece of advice, go walk and connect with the environment, and be kind to yourself. I think that's from a personal point of view. From a work point of view, from a consumerism point of view, I think definitely look for B Corps, look for companies that are doing and signing up to these things and doing the work. I try and live by that, and invest in as much as I can with B Corps. But B Corp isn't the be all and end all. There's a lot of other amazing companies that are doing great work out there, and you should be looking to purchase and engage with those. I think from a tourism point of view and my philosophy, and hopefully I've articulated this throughout this conversation, we're not perfect. I think no one's perfect, but don't let that be a barrier, Sonya. Own it. So I think clearly understand your impact, good, bad, or otherwise. Know that it's not going to be perfect. Commit to doing the work to change, amplify, minimize, and then get out there and take action around the shit you care about. Yeah, no one else is going to. Don't wait for someone else. And I think that's probably my big message is don't wait. If you're passionate about something you need to see change, go out there and do it. And that, can be from getting out there talking, getting out there engaging in your industry, being the lead in your community. It takes on so many forms, and it's going to need all of us to make change. So I think for me it's not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. We aren't. Commit to understand your impact, and then go make the changes and get out there and take action. So hopefully that answered your question there, Sonya, but that's my message. Get out there, take action, and be kind to yourself. Look after yourself.
That's an excellent message, right? We have to be the change we want to see in the world, or else if it's not us making the change, then who's going to do it?
And also too, Sonya, I think we all get overwhelmed we're not all going to be Greta Thunberg. Like, we're not all going to be Obama and have these amazing platforms and be these big people making, big public bold statements and change. But you sure as hell can do the right thing day in, day out and be the change in your local community you want to be. And that's really bloody important. So I think don't get overwhelmed. Make some small changes. You'll learn more. From that learning, you'll take bigger steps. So get started and don't be overwhelmed. Just start.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great advice. So obviously we don't have speaker gifts, but is there a charity that I would love to donate in lieu of a speaker gift to a charity? And I don't know if it's your Intrepid Foundation or, but think about it and let me know.
I'll let you know. I donate when I lived in Toronto to the food bank there in Toronto, and I continue have done that during the pandemic from afar. Toronto is a pretty important place to me. I have a special connection. I love my time there. So if you can make a donation to the Toronto Food Bank, I'd be eternally grateful for that.
We are on it. Thank you so much, Leigh. This has been super inspirational, very interesting. I know that I absolutely loved this conversation. I'm sure everyone, you're going to have, everyone's frantically coming onto the chat and saying how much they appreciate your time, especially coming, all the way from Australia. And just thank you so much. I really think that, you really opened our eyes to a lot of, great things that you're doing and also how we all could be doing it. And I think for me, that's the biggest takeaway. The fact that you guys are sharing your knowledge and advocating for more sustainable action amongst your colleagues. Like, this isn't something that's proprietary, right? And, it's funny, I put this in all my lectures, right? To say that if you do not protect the industry that you're working, you're not going to have an industry. Right. And that is the fundamental thing that we all have to realize in the tourism industry. It's not just about growth. It's not just about profit, because you will not have an industry in 20 years. This is not something that, can grow exponentially. We have limits to growth. This is what scientists have been saying. Climate change is happening. You could see it. So we really need to all work together. And, I'm really happy that you're saying that, at the New York Times, that the travel show, that was the focus, because we really need to look at it. So thank you so much for coming to share your insights and your sunny demeanor from your apartment in Melbourne.
And also too, Sonya, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to yourself and all the work that Ryerson is doing. I think it's incredibly important that we inspire and engage the next generation of tourism professionals. That's about as professional as I get, that little spirit. But I think at our company too, there's some great examples of future leaders. Mikey being one of them who's come on. We've had a number of other employees, Libby Shabata from the Ryerson program, that have gone on to be very successful individuals. So keep up the good work, and then always we're going to need more passionate Ryerson graduates at Intrepid. So please keep up the good work. Thanks so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
And you're going to love to hear who's our next speaker next week, because he's a friend of yours as well. So I just wanted to do a promo for our speaker series for next week. So I'd like to share some information. Dr. Joseph Cheer, also from Melbourne. So, but he's in, is he, I don't even know where he is right now. If he's back at Wakayama or.
Yeah, I think he's great. This will be really good. He'll be much smarter than me, much smarter. He's amazing.
He uses really big words that I'm kind of like, oh. So Dr. Joseph Cheer from Wakayama University. Yeah. In Japan, will be joining us for Compass next week, our HTM research speaker series. He will be sharing his presentation titled Tourism Sustainability and Resilience. So again, keeping on our sustainability theme, complementary or contradictory. So he will be presenting next Thursday, October 8th at 7:30 Eastern Time. And to receive the live stream link, please register by scanning the QR code or typing in the URL displayed on your screen. So since we're wrapping up, as I said, I absolutely love this. I thought this was, this was something for me that I really look forward to, but I feel so, revived and excited about things to come. I love listening to stories like great companies, such as Intrepid. And I just really would like to thank you, Leigh, for coming once again. I would like to thank, the people that you work with, like Nicole and Mikey Sadowski, from Intrepid Travel, in really, taking your time out of your day and talking to us. And thank you to, people at HTM like Frederick, Dimanche, for his support and introduction today, to our administrative staff, Laura, Cecilia, and Sadia from our office. And of course, I want to give a giant thank you to Brian Ryback, who works he's our communications manager at the Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research, and the brains behind the podcast and the blog and all the other fun stuff that he's been doing. So thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's attended. Leigh, it'd be great for you to check out some of the chats that have come up. And we look forward to seeing you next week at our Compass Speaker Series. And happy World Tourism Day, everybody. And thank you, Leigh.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Hold on to me as we go, as we roll down this unfamiliar road. And although this wave is stringing us along, just know you're not alone. 'Cause I'm gonna make this place your home. Settle down, it'll all be clear. Don't pay no mind to the demons, they fill you with fear. The trouble, it might drag you down. If you get lost, you can always be found. Know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make